If you're like me, you have watched a video how to do the water pump on the 2005, I think 2001 to 2005 Honda Civic, and yet I did half the work and there I am. So come along, I'll show you how to actually not do as much as a lot of the other videos are showing you to do and get the job done. This is for the 2001 to 2005 Honda Civic. This is a 1.7 liter non-VTEC single overhead cam. There is only one top spinner here. And that area down there, water pump. That right there, tensioner to the timing. That down there, that would be your pulley for your crank down there. It doesn't even want to focus. There it is once I move my hand out of the way. And what I've seen in a lot of videos is that you actually have to pull the valve cover off. When you don't, you do not have to take off this whole wiring harness right here. It is still attached. The valve cover is still on. And yet, everything is so disassembled right now. So all you need to do to get this done, I'm going to show you the easiest way. And I'm going to show you any problem areas that I may have encountered to help you get your job done a little bit easier. And if you've seen those other videos, they will tell you to go ahead and disconnect the battery. This still connected. The alternator still connected. The power steering. In the other videos that I've seen, they actually keep the power steering wrapped up and around this way, just as I have. But they do disconnect the alternator, which isn't necessarily necessary. If you're an auto mechanic or you're working on somebody else's car and you keep disconnecting the battery every time you show up, there's sooner or later somebody's going to say something about those radio presets or anything else that may be programmed or whatever that is erased at the moment. So if you do disconnect the battery, take the time to go in the car and see what presets as far as balance, bass, treble, what stations, you know, are actually in there. Because yeah, I've had quite a few customers actually be really happy that I saved their stuff for them. So moving on, you can get to the water pump minus one bolt, which would be the top one right there. Now, to get all that out, because you don't have to do everything, there's the timing belt. To get the timing belt off, you have to remove that whole lower bracket that wraps around the front, holds the power steering, and yeah, sits right above where the alternator sits. So the alternator is down below. This is the AC compressor, and then up in this area right here would be the alternator, and then up above here is going to be your actual power steering. But I got a small bit of a leak, and yeah, there's definitely water pump. Anyway, regardless, you're going to want to take this 10mm for your crankshaft sensor, crankshaft position sensor. You're going to take that off and out the way so that you can get your belt off, but you don't have to necessarily, and do be careful because this does move back and forth, okay? You can see that sliding. Just be careful with that. Regardless, that's all there. The bracket. Okay. So this bracket tends to be a pain, and this is all the parts. Yes, I did take the spark plugs out, or not the spark plugs, but the actual coilover plugs out, just because I didn't want the resistance when I was trying to lift the valve cover ever so slightly, and I do mean ever so slightly. The only reason that you want to get the actual valve cover and do the whole valve cover job is to get this. This is the upper cover that they show you, but they don't show you is that, okay, well, what they don't show you is that that lip right there is not that big. Okay, so when you're doing that, you can pry on it a little bit with plastic. So you pry up on the valve cover, and then you come down and get this out the way. There is usually some kind of small gasket right here, but there's no oil that passages on this side of the whole crankshaft, or not crankshaft, sorry, the camshaft pulley there. So the camshaft pulley is dry. This is a small lip. I don't know if you can see that, but it is a very small lip, and you can just pry that right up under once you pry up just slightly, so then you don't have to take the whole valve cover off. So there's trick number one, okay, for getting that out. Yes, you do have to get that bolt out, and then, you know, that would be the camshaft position sensor. This one I left out because this is my personal vehicle, and I know that this is kind of a pointless screw. It helps hold the lower one. Anyway, this one I leave in there because you definitely need that rigidity there. So I had those two bolts taken out. That is the cover for the camshaft position sensor. So that was one issue that I had. And everything as far as the brackets go, this is for the power steering. Okay, so all the bolts, I do believe, are same length, so you don't have to worry about any of that. There is 3 bolts there. Okay, so just keep that in mind for that one. There's 3 bolts to dismount that one. This one, however, is the one in question that covers up the timing belt and won't allow you to actually get the timing belt off if you actually have this installed, because it goes through that little loop area in there. In there, I should point out. The problem with this, if you ever wanted to modify your own and not have to take off this whole freaking bracket just to get the water pump out, as if you wanted to go back in there, get a carbide bit or something to chisel back this metal right here, and you will be in the clear and not have to actually take this. You can chisel this back a little bit and it's not going to hurt anything. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 bolts running through it, so I don't think that little bit of metal is ever going to be a problem. But I didn't want to do that on the car because then you'd have metal shavings everywhere. I didn't want it near the timing belt because that's one of the last belts ever that I would want to actually have break while driving or any other time. This, okay, let me see here if I can show you or not. I don't know. Let me see if I can show you or not. Okay, I'm gonna have to hold that with one hand. These are 3 different size bolts, and or actually 2 different size. So those 2 are the same. Is it this one? I think it's this one. Yeah, this one's the shorter one. If you can see that. Okay, put the heads together. That one's shorter. That one goes on the lower half right there. I'm looking at it kind of backwards. You got your 2 engine hoist little prongy bolts, and that short one goes in the bottom right there. This one that I'm touching and this one I'm picking up and putting in the hole right there, those 2 exactly the same size. So no worries if you ever get that all crisscrossed or anything, then just know that the short one goes on the bottom on the front side. So that was the other issue that I had. You don't need a Honda specialty tool to take the crankshaft off. That's a big old no. That's a waste. I mean, I can't say that because every car is different, but every Honda Civic that I've came across at a 1.7 liter, I've never had to use an actual pulley or anything to hold the pulley and do this and that. So I just hit it with an impact and I was able to get that bolt off of there. It is a 19mm bolt. This is the old water pump. It says Honda on there, so I'm thinking 220 some odd or 30 some odd thousand miles. This is the original water pump. These bolts are all the same except for, see, because it goes like that in the motor. Okay, the 2 longer bolts go towards the back or the firewall. So these 2 are longer, these 2 are shorter, and these are the 2 that hide kind of like behind in that area. Keep in mind these 2 posts, okay, because that's where your engine mount kind of sits on, you know, on that nice wishbone. So you got, don't forget that. Oh my god, did I show you that? There's 2 right here. I had to find that one. It was definitely not in there. Like I couldn't find it when I was trying to take this off. I was like, what? There's a bolt left. Anyway, so that's all done. Just so you know, to the design of this, I do believe that long 2 right there is going to be your weep hole. Your weep hole is going to be one of the final kind of hey, I've given up as a water pump for you signs. At that point, you know, it's not putting any pressure and it's just blowing out of that hole, and that's just not good. But yeah, I am going to sit here, replace the water pump, because I've got a new one, lifetime warranty, O'Reilly's. Just picked it up today. I'm still going to reuse this belt, and I will show you how to check your timing belts, or any belts for that matter, because I have 3 really good examples. Okay, if you can't, so this is how this belt normally lays on its own. Okay, and what you're looking for is cracks and any kind of aging, any kind of present aging. And a good way to do that, bend it backwards and see if you can see anything that looks like stress cracks that are floating through. The little ribs that you do see on camera are manufactured. Those are not like wear cracks. So you have that, okay? So it doesn't look bad, right? And of course there's different types of belts out there, different sets and things like that. So you have that belt. That one looks okay. And yes, I am going to reuse that timing belt, which is a big old question. So I'm doing the same thing, bend this back. This is the belt that is newer for your power steering. This is my power steering belt. If you can see that, there's no cracking, nothing down the side really. Okay, so that one is okay. That's like brand new almost. I mean, it's got like 25,000 miles on it, but it has no signs of wear. I'm not replacing that one. Now this one, you start to look at this. This one's kind of important. It runs the crankshaft off of the crankshaft to the AC, and it also runs the alternator, which is one of those things you don't want to have gone. So if you start to look at this one, I don't know if you can see that, but there's cracks all through this thing. There's vertical cracks, there's horizontal, there's a lot of different, there's pieces missing. You can see that. Oh my goodness. This is recommended by a mechanic to be replaced, definitely. I am going to mark the mileage and see how much longer this belt has on it, you know, lasts for me. So there will be updates on that belt, as well as this belt, and as well as that belt. They're all going to be you know, updates on that. And I don't know if you've seen my other video, but I said something about the intake. It was the 350Z intake video. This is the sand I was talking about. It is everywhere, and once it starts going everywhere, it just, yeah, just no good. There's a lot of grit and sand up in parts, in places that I didn't know sand could go. So that's why another reason that I'm real skeptical about putting the cone filter on the 350Z. I hope you've seen that video, and if you didn't, please go over there and check my videos, and that should be on the channel. It's actually quite interesting kind of information that I was able to pull off of that. So I will show you how to rebuild this and put it all back together from here. I had a loose clamp right there, if you can see that one. That is the return line for the power steering that goes back to the rack, and that was loose. It's an original type of clamp, and it was just a little loose, a little, you know, needed tightened up. So I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna degrease it, make sure that there is no other leaks in that area. Otherwise, I'm gonna go back in and try to figure out that leak. But that timing belt, or timing mark, is that right there to that. I couldn't find that because the belt was in the way slightly. So if you ever see that, do note that it is on the actual oil pump, which is what's sitting behind this crank pulley here. This whole thing that's kind of bolted in right there and everything. That's the oil pump, and it'll drive the obviously create oil pressure for you. But just to let you know, that is the mark that you're supposed to line up with that arrow right there. All right. Here's another trick that I seen, because before I took the timing apart and actually decided, you know, that this was on top dead center and trying to line it up and mark this or whatever, because the timing marks for the Honda is, of course, this, right? And the same thing for the other side. Now, that mark is supposed to be in line with the top of the head there. And I don't know if I can get the right angle to show you that it is, but the bottom was on time, and it's supposed to be up there. It's like, okay, so that's slightly a better angle. So you're supposed to be up there. What I did before I loosened the belt or anything, just take a black marker, make your own timing belt or timing mark. The bottom crankshaft one is very important. Okay, don't get me wrong. But between this mark with the black marker and that mark back there that is lined up all the way down here, so I can follow that down and line that up, I should be fine. And then if you look on there, that says up in a weird stamped way. So you have a mark right there, and then that goes back to the top of the actual valve cover. So then that is a good indicator instead of trying to figure out, because so I just wanted to let you know, that is some real easy quick tips to trying to actually get this job done a little bit easier. Every video that I've seen doing this has this whole valve cover off. Like I said, I just pulled this up slightly by loosening those bolts. I didn't take the wiring harness all the way off. I just lifted it slightly because this bolt over here is the one that is just a little bit covered with all of that. So I just loosened that and was able to pull that back slightly. It's a good way to get that out of the way so you have enough room and eyesight, and you can get your tools in there and, you know, everything. So I would definitely suggest getting the power steering and just wrapping it up and out of the way like you might see on other videos. This one, don't take the alternator off. Be cautious. This point right here is connected to your battery. So anytime that you want to connect, let's see here, if you're still connected to the battery, which we are, then I can actually test right at this point right here, because that's connected straight to the battery, and I should be able to actually get the same voltage there as at the battery. So have that covered up. Don't let that touch anything. The main thing that's going to touch on the way up and out is this. So, and this is the AC. It's an AC line, so it's metal. Don't touch it. Do your best. Do not touch it. You don't have to take everything apart to actually try and get everything, you know, fixed. So at this point, I did notice when I was doing the water pump that there's some kind of, it was hitting here, because I rubbed that and it's not changing. Like, if you could see that, like, you could see where I'm rubbing, but you could see something metal to metal was rubbing right there, and I think that was part of the water pump issue. So yeah, wonderful. I'm gonna go ahead and start to get everything else cleaned up and start showing you guys how to put this back together, so then at least you see the last half of it, and hopefully, which I'm pretty darn confident, this is gonna run afterward. There's nothing really too major that I was doing in here that it should be questionable. And again, this is one of those things that even anybody can try to accomplish, especially a weekend warrior, anybody who just wants to pick up a tool. You should be able to do this. So I'm going to show you the rest of the way and the easiest way how to get this done and back together. This time I went with O'Reilly's Import Direct OE replacement parts. This is a lifetime warranty. The only difference was like a $10 between a 1-year warranty and a 10-year, or not 10-year, lifetime warranty. Might as well just go ahead and get the whole lifetime warranty. Don't have to worry about it. Trying to save $10. This isn't bad. Where's it? Does this thing have a version on it? Okay, that's how you find it. All right. Made in the North American continent. All right. So, box is blown out when I got it, but there's the gasket, which is a O-ring type. Fits in a galleyway of some sort. this alleyway, as a matter of fact. Man, that box did not make it the whole trip. This is the back of the pump. These are the veins that, in a tight area, is what's moving all your coolant around. This little sharp area where I'm cutting my finger right here is where the actual O-ring that seals that in, held in by 4 10mm bolts. That's how we're going to roll today. Again, that is a clean weep hole, because you can actually see down in there without it being so damn dirty. But like I said, this is an OE replacement part. Okay, so a little bit better quality, but it doesn't say Honda, which is exactly why I'm thinking that the other one, the water pump, made it well over 200,000 miles. I don't know how many cars can really say that. Not to say that everyone doesn't, but it is nice to know that there are still cars that are making it 200,000 miles without having to replace every single part. Regardless, this is going to go back on the car. I love the fact that it's new. It doesn't feel bad. There's a little bit of sharp ridging, but that shouldn't cause an issue with any part of replacement and replacing this whole thing. So if I nicely open this, okay, all right. Yeah, completely nice. Don't forget to be nice with it. Anyway, this here fits right in there, and there's even, they make little pieces for it to get stuck. So when that little piece in there is to help it get stuck. So when you start to actually place this on the motor, your gasket doesn't start falling out, and then you miss a gasket and you go through all this trouble, and then you got to go through it again because it's leaking. So that is something you just kind of just nicely roll in there, kind of pinch it, let it pinch just a little bit. You don't have to tear it up or anything like that, but just roll, pinch just a little bit, and it's sticking. Wow. Press, roll, pinch. This is almost like a song. All right. Press, roll, pinch. Press. Getting around that tight bend there. Oh, hit one of those little pieces. It's in there. And then this last little bit just rolls right there. So now, because of those little pinches in the design of where the gasket is supposed to go, as such, I can now pick this up, and if I were to hang this over this nice clean floor here, and it doesn't move whatsoever. So that is the advantage of having those little teeth in there, because then it's going to hold it well enough for you to be able to put this together, and then it'll finish smushing out as you tighten this down onto the actual block. So, well, let's go for it. Now that the water pump is on, all 4 bolts, and just cat a corner just from that one down on the other side. You can't really see because of the camera angle, but it is down there, and down there, okay, but it's up under there anyway. So you could just kind of horseshoe that behind there, because it has a little extra hook, and I did not take this plastic off. That they went through extra lengths to go ahead and get that off of there. Just horseshoe back in there. Make sure you have that one long bolt back in the correct spot. And the next thing to do from here is to go ahead and get your timing in order. Now, that's where those marks are going to come into play, and it's going to be really nice. So I'm going to do a little bit of a cleanup job down around here, put the belt on, and once I get that in time, I will show you how I got that in time. And here's another note when turning or putting on the timing belt that I have not heard from any of these other videos, is that slide this key, because you can't put the timing belt on. Okay, so you still have the bolt, the crankshaft pulley bolt still in the crankshaft there, and I had trouble actually slipping the belt on until I actually moved this forward. So that right, trying to get that focus on, this slides backwards, and when when it was all backwards, I could not get in there enough to actually slap it all the way around. So I moved that all the way forward, and I was actually able to get this belt around everywhere. So keep that in mind when you're doing your timing, that if you're having a problem trying to get that crankshaft or the timing belt onto the crankshaft pulley, pull this actual forward towards this bolt, which is another reason to have that in there until your timing is all done and everything, because you got to spin the motor over anyway. So just a little heads up there. And yes, a few more notes to throw in there that I did not see in the other videos. Slide this forward. Don't have it sitting all the way on there. I don't know if you can necessarily tell from the video, but it is not slid all the way on technically. There is room where that's supposed to slide backwards a little bit more, and at the bottom over here you can see that there's a lip, so it's kind of hanging over the edge. This is halfway in midland and kind of forward. It's actually forward more because it's supposed to, there's a big gap down below here and where the key bolt actually sits right now. So doing that and doing that will put more allowance in this whole belt to slip forward and be able to slip over this whole piece. This motor also turns counterclockwise. The importance in that is that, again, the other video that I've seen, they were tightening this clockwise, which puts tension, it's drawing all the tension from this side, and that is not right. You're going to wear that tensioner out if it were to be designed that way. So the designing is for this to turn counterclockwise, so this side's going to go down, which means this belt is going to go down. So crankshaft is directly pulling from there to here. So as you rotate this, you're rotating counterclockwise to make sure that this whole length here will stay in time. So the best way is to keep this hole tensioned. There's a bunch of stuff over here and everything, so this is why this is just to keep the last bit tightened from slipping around the crankshaft. So yeah, just keep that in mind as you're seeing all these different videos, and maybe hopefully you pop up on this one. Please give it a like, especially if it's helpful. But this is definitely counterclockwise, because this is what you want to keep tensioned, because as soon as this gets slop in it and too much, then the timing between the cam and the crank down there is going to become too different, and that's where you're going to have some kind of an explosion or engine failure, to say the least, or whatever. So just keep that in mind as you're doing your timing. Okay, again, so pulling, got the belt on, it's just barely on there, but it is all the way on there. This I kept just the same without trying to move either pulley, and then as I fit this all around, I put it around this belt, that pulley, which is the water pump, that's the tensioner, and then all the tension I kept trying to bring over here, all the looseness I should say, kept this where it's at. All the any looseness in between the crank and the tensioner and the water pump and up here, this can free move on its own, so to speak, and be okay. It doesn't matter where you set that, it only matters where you set the camshaft and the crankshaft. So pulling all the looseness out of this side, and that's how I was able to work this up and over. And then it's just as simple as, well, I gotta go, release the tensioner down below again or whatever, and give it some slack with that 6mm hex key. Pulling that up towards the firewall, and that right there should allow me to actually push the belt the rest of the way on, and the pulley down below the rest of the way on as well. And that right there is the trick that really makes a difference in trying to actually get this set and having the hardest time and everything else. So note the timing markers right there, and I'm gonna go ahead and, which is always a smart idea, rotate the motor a couple times. This is an interference motor again, so if something is wrong, then rotating it by hand is not going to damage anything. But if you go and kick the starter, then that is, yeah, it's, and it's off time, then it's probably going to not be good. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead, as you note the gap in between where the crank timing pulley is and that gap right there, because like I said, it was moved forward, so then you can get a little bit of room to get everything kind of lined up, because this is a stiff belt. So keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this, make sure that this is in time. So going down to the crankshaft motor with that 19 millimeter crankshaft bolt down there, counterclockwise twisting, I rotated the motor 4 times down below. I felt compression, you know, felt everything moving, and didn't hear anything hitting. And then once I aligned that up on the bottom, as you can see, it still looks very much in time. So if the bottom is in time, rotate it, and you know what I mean, it's back in time. And then the top, you come back up here, it's in time again. Hence why I don't see anybody putting just a simple mark up there. And it makes it so much easier, instead of trying to go down there with something flat and figuring out if these lines over here are flush with the actual thing or not. That can be a little bit of a headache. So just keep that in mind, because that's a really, really good and simple trick to make things a lot easier for you in the future. So next thing to do now, I'm going to go ahead and put my crank pulley, or what is it, crankshaft position sensor down below on, and remove that little hex key. And I'm going to start cleaning out the bracket and putting that bracket that goes over the timing belt back on there. The bracket is on, and this is the point in the project where, well, with the, what is that, crank position sensor down there and everything, I love the part of the project when you do that. Now you're putting everything together. So now I'm going to go ahead and throw these bolts, 1, 2, and 3 on that side, and 1, 2. Yeah. Here's the 1, and down below just a little bit further, right? Okay, maybe not in sight. Yeah, right there in sight. It is. I'm going to go ahead and tighten those and keep on jamming. Now that the bracket is on, next thing is going to be the alternator. That is what fits down below, next above the actual AC compressor there. So I'm going to put that down here. And if you don't know, this is the lower bracket that holds the alternator on, and it is also the tensioner. This bolt will be driven through the alternator. Do not tighten it all the way. You're going to end up putting your belt on and then pulling and unscrewing that to pull it back and put more tension on the belt. Once you put more tension on the belt, this is going to go into there, into the alternator. This little shiny part goes into the block where it's going to hold it or whatever. So block, bottom of the alternator, and then this is how you adjust the actual belt for the alternator. And then you go back and tighten this one down the rest of the way. And that can, to further that, which you don't have to, but you can, to solidify that belt tension, is to actually tighten the top bolt as well. This top bolt, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that on. And highlighting just yet another trick, there is a sleeve that sits in. So if you have trouble actually putting that in there, and you just like, seems like it's just too tight to fit in there, there are ways, like a screwdriver, to go ahead and kind of give a twisting motion in between all the metal and try to push that back. You might be able to just hit it with a chisel backwards as such on an angle and drive that back, but basically that inner sleeve right there does move on its own and then squeezes back up with the actual bolt itself. So give that a few taps if you need to, like I'm just getting ready to do, and move that whole little sleeve back. So then it makes your life a lot easier trying to put this alternator in here, instead of trying to just wiggle and for like 15 minutes or more, arms just burning trying to get this thing in here, and all you have to do is just hit that little sleeve back a little bit. And just with a few poundings, that's exactly a few poundings. Anyway, you can see how there's fresh metal because it was just easily driven backwards. And if I pick up this nice greasy alternator here, yeah, all day, real easy. So if you come across that issue, that is your problem, just drive it backwards. Make sure you're not driving on the actual bolt itself, but on that actual sleeve. And now that the lower pulley for the alternator is loosely on, as you can see a gap in between there on the block, and that one is in the alternator itself very, very loosely. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put the camshaft position sensor back on, and the upper cover that was such a big battle where everybody's taking the valve cover off and spending another hour just trying to do all that. So I'm going to do that, put that cover back, put the camshaft position sensor back, and go on to the next thing. And that popped right back in. Slid it just vertically in front of these two posts here, and then kind of went in, and this side went in, and then wiggle. This went up slightly, the valve cover, and then it just, you could hear like a little pop. So it all just went right back in. That's exactly where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to go to the top side and tighten all these valve cover screws up. Woo! And just like that, the valve cover is already tightened back down. And I'm going to move on to the crankshaft because I want that belt back on there. And I'm not sure if I explained that earlier, but when you spin the motor to do the timing and make sure everything's in the right spot, okay? I zip this on with a Milwaukee M18 impact, just a hair, just a couple hits, just to get that tightness, and then it was tight enough just barely to go ahead and twist this backwards manually, so then I can get my timing in time. And just like that, with the same M18 impact, should one-handedly be able to just like that. And that's why I say you don't need a Honda tool to hold this. And I don't even know how much they are because I've never actually went and purchased one, but there's no damage to the bolt, as I'm getting ready to show you if I can ever spin this off. Wow, it's long. Okay, no damage to the bolt or anything like that, no damage to the crankshaft, anything like that. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have the Honda tool to hold the crankshaft like they're telling you that you need so desperately, you don't technically. You just have to work around it and be careful and cautious of what you're doing. Another note, I don't think people talked about that key. That little piece of metal that fits in there is what's called a key. The splines around the side, well, there are none. So for the crank pulley to be pulling your AC on and your alternator that's up above there and everything else, it has some kind of tension on it. So all that tension keeping the belt spinning is mainly from that and being tightened down correctly. But yeah, a lot of that force is stopped because of the key. So when you take that off, there we go. Hopefully it's still in there. Yeah. That little piece of metal is very important. So if you lose that, it's probably going to spin by itself. And that outer edge right here is exactly where that tool spins. Another reason that they want you to use that tool when taking that apart is because this is a two-piece crankshaft. So you have metal on the outside, and then as you see here, this is rubber, and then you have another metal that goes all the way to the center here that's all built together. This rubber is a damper for when AC kicks on, or if your alternator hits harder, whatever differences within the actual belts. It'll actually take a little bit of that smoothness and make it a little bit smoother, I should say, to during driving and everything else. So that is why, another reason that they don't want you to just sit here and try to hold it on the outside of this thing and try to break that loose, because that's really what's gonna put an end to Such a lovely looking piece. I mean, it's almost brand new, not really, but yeah, just keep in mind of that little metal piece right there, and even though it looks like there's edges and spines in there, those are not enough to do anything to in a real situation. That key is what it is, so keep that in mind. Do not lose that. So as that's pushed all the way back on, that actually does not um, scoot back all the way, so don't be scared of that. And any little bit from there should be okay. That metal key is actually in there just a hair further than the surface that it's trying to, meet with there. So I'll go ahead and throw this together and give it a little hit. I'm on the I'm on the splines. It's threaded. Yeah, one more. All right. Looks good. Looks real good. Awesome. Now I can put the belt on. Alright, so the way that I did this with the tensioner, there is no set spot for the actual bar itself to sit. So I went ahead and pulled up, with everything slightly assembled, I pulled up on the wing nut out there for the tensioner. So then this would have go up slightly with the whole bracket or whatever like that. Then I tightened this one, okay? Then I came back, snug this up, but then I loosened it. So then you can actually still make the adjustments. Hand did the wing nut right there, then went ahead and snugged that back up. Once I was done with that side, I went ahead and got the other bolt right there, tightened up just a little bit. It could be tighter, but it is a pivoting bolt. It doesn't have to. It's just to help snug things up. And once I snug that up, if you can tell the difference now, that sleeve was driven back in really easily. So keep that in mind for another hint and trick or whatever. But that is on. Now I just need to go after the power steering and some wiring and some coilovers or coilover plugs. Yeah. It's a little wiggle test. Nothing crazy because it is wires, but make sure that that is on. I did not have to take that wire off for the whole, I think that's the throttle cable there. I did not have to take that one off. This one I loosened up. And this is the main one that I had to take off, just so you can pull that wiring harness up enough to get in there to get access to that. Now that that wiring is done, I really want this to be supported on its own weight now and not on the little jack up under. So I'm going to go ahead and put this wishbone back together so then I can take the support from up under out. And with that, those 3 bolts, engine mount is now tight. And see how much this shifted, see if this did shift or not. No, it's sweet. Trick if you're not used to working on cars, this whole bracket wasn't here. This holds the actual reservoir. If you can take the bolt out when you disassemble it, and leave it back in there, so then when you come back to reassemble it, that same bolt is in there and you're not looking through a pile of bolts wondering which one goes where. And now that you have the actual power steering pump bracket on and power steering bracket into the places and where it's supposed to be all snazzed up right there, now it's time to actually get that little pain in the ass bolt down there tightened and this tightened once you get the belt on. So adjust the belt and start tightening the two bolts that hold the pump on as well. So now that the power steering belt is back on and the wing nut is tight and that little bolt is tight, the last part for this project as far as parts throwing back on there would be for me to remove my damn flashlight out of the fucking way and put that back on there. I'm going to put the wheel back on and put it back on the floor, and then I can start the bleeding process and get this project done and over with. And as simple as that, it is starting and running, no problem whatsoever, except for I tightened my belt just a slight bit too tight and it made a slight squealing noise, which I stopped the motor and went ahead and figured that out by just disconnecting the belt, if I can ever talk, and the noise went away, so I went ahead and redid the tightening on that, and that was that. So with that, that should be a lot easier way how to get your water pump replaced without having to do as much work as other videos I may have seen on YouTube. So do that. Obviously, the last thing for me to do would be to bleed the rest of the cooling system and get that all squared away. But if you found this helpful, insightful, anything, just give it a, like or subscribe or just keep watching. I appreciate your time and thanks for watching today. Have a great day.